I got to Vietnam in the rainy season of 1970, 19 years old, and trying to pretend I wasn't terrified. Home was the first course, up near Da Nang. The Marines broke that part of South Vietnam into little patches and dropped small units like mine into villages. We lived with the locals, patrolled at night, trying to keep the enemy from owning the ground after dark. They called it a combined action platoon. 15 Marines, a bunch of Popular Forces militia, and one interpreter who knew just enough English to argue with all of us. Days were rice paddies and heat and kids begging for candy. Nights were something else entirely. You learned to walk looking at the ground more than the horizon. The enemy loved booby traps. Artillery shells wired to trip lines, grenades under Coke cans, punji stakes in pits dressed up with leaves. Everybody knew someone who had been blown apart by something nobody saw. They used to talk about the numbers, how many casualties came from traps instead of firefights, but the number didn't matter. What mattered was that every step felt like a coin flip. You start to walk different when you live like that. Shorter steps, eyes scanning for anything out of place. A new scrape on a tree. Fresh dirt in a spot that should be packed hard. A bush that looks a little too neat. That day started quiet. We'd spent the afternoon helping the locals build up a dike after the rain chewed it out. My boots were caked with mud. My rifle felt heavier than usual. Our squad leader, Staff Sergeant King, sat in the shade with his map and cigarette, talking with the village chief and our interpreter, Thu, about where the bad guys liked to move at night. They decided we would set an ambush near a junction of two trails, just beyond the last line of paddies. Supposedly, the Viet Cong used it to move between hamlets. We'd heard mortar a few nights before, somewhere out that way, and the brass wanted us to find whoever was walking around with a tube and base plate. We'll leave after last light, King told us. Out, sit, listen, hit them if they come through, back before dawn. Easy night. Every time someone said easy in Vietnam, I wanted to throw up. We geared up as the sun started to drop behind the low hills. The village changed character when the light went orange. Kids disappeared into doorways. The women hurried to finish cooking. The men watched us in that way I never got used to, like we were both their shield and their curse. Two caught up to me at the edge of the hoach we used as a patrol base. "You be careful tonight, Marine," he said. "No traps, no bang bang. You come back. Drink beer." "Sounds good to me," I told him. "You keep the chief alive while I'm gone." He laughed, but only with his mouth. The eyes stayed tired. We stepped off as the sky went from gold to gray. 12 Marines, 6 PF. King up near the front, me in the middle of the file. The point man was a kid named Morales from Texas, lanky, quiet, always humming to himself when he thought nobody could hear. The world shrank down to the man in front of you and the ground under your boots. We moved along a raised paddy bund, single file. Water on both sides reflected the last light. The frogs were loud. Every now and then a water buffalo snorted somewhere out in the dark. You'd see a cigarette ember rise and fall from a hoach doorway as someone took a drag, then nothing again. Once we cleared the last paddy, the trail slid into a stand of trees. The jungle closed around us, thick and damp. The air felt heavier, like it had weight you could push with your hand. King passed the word up. Red lens on. Sound discipline. We're close. We killed the white lights and clicked on the red filtered flashlights just long enough to check footing when we needed it. Mostly, we walked by the faint glow of the sky and what your eyes could grab from the shapes around you. You never really see the moment where it goes from "I'm walking on a trail" to "I'm walking into somebody's kill zone." It just happens, and you either catch it or you don't. We didn't. The first sign was a snap. Not loud, but sharp, followed by one breath of silence where my brain tried to decide if it was a branch or something worse. Then the world jumped. The explosion hit from the left side of the trail, somewhere toward the head of the column. The flash lit the trees. I felt the concussive slap in my chest. Something hard smacked my helmet. The air turned into a cloud of dirt and leaves and metal. I dropped instinctively, one knee in the mud, rifle up, but I couldn't see a target. Just shapes in smoke and the silhouettes of my own guys. Then the screaming started. Corpsman. Nobody ever yelled medic like in the movies. It was always corpsman, stretched out, jagged. Doc Reyes, our Navy corpsman, shoved past me, nearly knocking me into the brush. I slid to the side of the trail, covering the left, heart hammering so hard my sight picture jumped with each beat. I could hear King shouting up ahead, voice hoarse and controlled. Get security out, left and right. PFS on the rear. Find the damn wires. There might be more. Somebody up front was yelling that morale was down. Another voice, high and panicked, kept repeating, I can't see, I can't see. Gunfire cracked from the trees. Not a full volley, just short bursts. Somebody on the other side probing us, trying to see if we were stunned enough to finish. The rounds snapped through branches overhead and smacked into trunks. Little explosions of bark and leaves, close enough that I tasted dust. I squeezed off a few rounds toward where I saw the flash, not because I was sure, but because I was more scared of doing nothing. The guys around me chimed in, disciplined but quick, and for a moment the sound of our rifles roared through the trees. King called it down the line. Check fire. We do not spray the whole damn jungle. I want eyes on wires and trip lines. They hit us once, they will try to hurt us. My hands were shaking, but the training was deeper than the fear. I scanned the ground in front of me, rifle hanging by its sling, searching for that thin, unnatural line, that disturbed patch of soil. Behind me, Doc was working on morales. The smell of burned explosive hung in the air, mixed with the more familiar smells of earth and sweat and something metallic. I heard Doc's voice in the dark. Breathing. He's breathing. Tourniquet here. Hold pressure. Damn it. You, shine that red light right there. I tried not to picture it. Tried not to imagine what the blast had done to a kid who had been humming 10 minutes before. King got on the radio with the firebase. We were inside their umbrella. He wanted illumination rounds and artillery on call, just in case whoever hit us decided to press in. Above us the sky lit, one star shell at a time, white light hanging from parachutes, turning the jungle into a ghost version of itself. Everything looked flat and strange. The shadows were harsh and long. You felt exposed, like someone had taken the roof off your house. The enemy fired again, short and fast, from a different angle. One of the PFS cursed in Vietnamese and dumped a magazine toward the flashes. King shouted at him to control his fire, but the man was beyond listening. I couldn't blame him. The thing about ambushes is, the job is not just to hurt people. It's to confuse them, to make them clump up, to push them where you want them. The booby trap had done its job. We were bleeding, off balance, and somebody out in the dark wanted us to move into whatever they had planned next. But King was stubborn. We are not going forward, he told the firebase, FDC. We are staying put, establishing a hasty perimeter on this trail, and we are getting my people out at first light. I want your guns ready if they decide to get brave. The voice from the other end sounded calm to the point of boredom. Roger, 1-1. Ilum rounds continuing. You call the grid and type if you see movement. We are awake. There is comfort in knowing somebody with big guns is awake. We set up a rough circle around the casualties. Marines on the compass points, PFS tied in between. Claymores facing out where we could manage it. I lay there in the mud, cheek against my stock, convincing myself I could hear footsteps or whispers every few seconds. Your brain starts to make patterns out of wind and leaves. Time stretched. Every so often, a flare popped overhead, pulling the jungle into harsh daylight for a minute. The rest of the time, it was black and red from our tiny filtered lights. You would glimpse someone's eyes, then nothing. Behind me, Doc kept working. I heard him give Morales morphine. Heard him argue with King about whether we could evac before dawn. We move now, we walk into whatever they have out there, King said. They want us stumbling around in the dark with a wounded man. They know we do not like leaving anybody. They count on that. So we just sit here and wait? Someone whispered. Yeah, King said. We sit here and we live through the night. That's the job. I had never spent that much time staring at the same patch of darkness. My neck ached. My legs were numb. My stomach cramped, not from hunger, just from clenching. At one point, I heard a muffled sob from the perimeter off to my right. Somebody lost the fight to keep it in. Nobody said anything. We all pretended not to hear. Hours went by like that. Nothing big, just tension, and the occasional pop of a distant round somewhere else in the province. The enemy, whoever they were, had decided the one blast and a few probing shots were enough. Maybe they thought we were more messed up than we were. Maybe they had somewhere else to be. Maybe they were just sending a message. The jungle doesn't explain its choices. Just before first light, the artillery stopped sending up flares. The sky went slowly gray, then less gray, and the shapes around us turned back into trees instead of monsters. A chopper thumped in from the direction of the big base. I couldn't see it at first, just hear the rotor beating the air. The sound always made my chest loosen a little. It meant somebody was coming for you. King popped a smoke grenade in a gap in the canopy to mark our position. The helicopter flared above the nearest paddy and settled into a hover, rotor wash, flattening the grass and whipping water into spray. We formed a security ring while Doc and two of the bigger guys carried Morales on a poncho between them. I only let myself really look at him when they lifted him. One leg was wrapped so thick in bandages, it looked like a stump of white cloth. The other was streaked with blood and mud. His face was pale, eyes half-lidded, lips moving silently. The crew chief on the bird reached down, grabbed Morales' webbing, and hauled, grunting with the effort. Doc scrambled in behind, head down. The pilot kept it steady, just long enough, then pulled up and banked away toward the firebase's aid station. As soon as the bird disappeared, the field felt emptier than before. We swept the area in daylight, checking for secondary traps. We found the crater where the first device had been. Bits of wire, pieces of wood where it had been anchored. It looked almost small compared to the noise it had made in my head. On the way back, the village looked like any other morning. Smoke from cooking fires rose in thin columns. Kids stared at us with wide eyes. A few of the older men watched more carefully, counting heads. Thu met us at the gate to our little compound. "How many hurt?" he asked. "One badly," King said. "He's on his way to the hospital. Maybe he keeps the leg, maybe he doesn't. We'll see." Thu nodded slowly. "We hear boom in the night," he said. "We hear gun. People here say, maybe the Marines leave now. Maybe they go to safer place." King shook his head. "We're not going anywhere," he said. "This is our village too, for now." When I took off my gear, my hands shook so much I had to sit on them for a bit. That was the part nobody sees in the photographs. The adrenaline leaves, and there's nothing propping you up. You start to feel exactly how close you came, how arbitrary the line was between you and the guy who got hit. Morales lived. Lost most of his lower leg, they told us weeks later. They shipped him stateside and gave him a prosthetic and a stack of paperwork, and probably not near enough counseling. The rest of us kept walking those trails. The ambush, as much as it hurt, wasn't what broke most people. It was the constant possibility, the way every footstep might be the one that hit a mine or a shell or some improvised nightmare. You stayed hyper-alert all the time, for months. When you finally went home, you brought that tension with you. Guys would hit the deck when a car backfired. They were wired to survive a place that no longer existed around them. Years later, when people asked me what combat was like, they expected a big story. Fire bases under attack, tracer fire streaking across the sky, jets dropping bombs in the distance. That all happened, sure. I saw a firebase once from above, ringed with bunkers and artillery, like a small city made of sandbags and metal, a lonely island in a hostile sea. But the memory that still wakes me up is quieter. It's a narrow trail, just after dark. The smell of wet earth, the sound of Morales humming under his breath, the snap of something that might be a branch, and one heartbeat of silence where you think, almost casually, I wonder what that was, before the world explodes and you're no longer the same person you were 5 seconds before. That's combat, as far as I'm concerned. It's not one big heroic scene. It's a long walk in the dark where somebody else decides when the light comes on.